Hi, this is Cheryl Gallant, your Conservative Member of Parliament for the patriotic riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke. This government must keep Canadians in a state of fear in order to maintain control. Today is day one of this summer period of police blockades for Ottawa in preparation for the reported hordes of unacceptables predicted to lay siege on our nation's capital. Yep. Checkpoint Charlie's around and inside the city. Back to the past with show me your papers drill, reminiscent of the old World War II movies and COVID lockdowns. The crisis this government is trying to manufacture is another public emergency. Remember how Trudeau and Freeland were simply giddy about their newfound powers to freeze and seize your bank account? They want that unfettered power back permanently. Another round of police blockades and jackboots, and it'll help become the normalized Canadian way of life. The Emergency Unpreparedness Minister, Bill Blair, the one who cried fire by truckers in an apartment building, and that Public Safety Minister Mendicino, claimed the truckers who haven't already had their vehicles seized, bank accounts frozen, and forced into bankruptcy are on the way to Ottawa, reportedly. I know this because I saw a video with me in it of a meeting of alleged organizers of the predicted siege. Take a look. What this clip actually depicts is a veteran who will have marched from British Columbia to Ottawa, completing his journey to pay respects to fallen soldiers at the War Memorial. Now, the day the veteran popped into Ottawa, he was marching through my riding. So I stopped into the meeting room to say hello. The veteran had marched almost entirely across the country to bring a message to the country's center of democracy, such as it is in its current state. It was rather surprising when I first walked in to see all the camera crews crowded into the back of the room. I didn't think they'd give a darn about a single veteran. They didn't. Mr. Tops laid out his idea for a new way for the public to work with government officials, period. He would conclude his march June 30th at the War Memorial, period. There were no rallying cries for protests, no encouragement for demonstrators on Parliament Hill. Quiet, respectful, polite. Well, the next day, I got phone calls from reporters I hadn't heard from in years, emails from the new crop of even lazier journalists who were absenting themselves of the most basic, fundamental, which is fact-checking. These stories had already been written. In the days preceding the arrival of Mr. Tops, the government had issued its narrative for Canada Day. Unlike last year's Day of Shame, totally based in media sensationalism, if you read Terry Glavin's May 26th article in the National Post, this Canada Day was to be the day of blame. Blame it on the truckers. Blame it on people who don't drive Teslas. Well, maybe that's why they hate truckers so much. Blame it on the people who don't want to be coerced by a prime minister they don't trust into being injected with a vaccine they saw didn't stop him from getting the virus. Blame it on everyone but those upon whom the fault lies, themselves. This government knows if people are worried about a siege, an occupation, bouncy castles, and hot tubs, they'll forget about losing money and precious vacation time because they couldn't get their passport renewed in time. They'll forget about the price of gas that's double because the government is phasing out our source of fuel. They'll forget about having to ration their grocery money because the cost of fuel for farming and delivery have driven the cost so high. They'll forget about the surgery. They've been on a waiting list for 2 years, now 4 years, because the government wasn't prepared for a pandemic. They'll forget about that lump they've wanted to get checked out, but can't because their family doctor left to work in a country where taxes aren't so excruciatingly high. They'll forget about the debt they owe from being forced into cruel and inhumane lockdowns. They'll forget about having what we watch on the internet controlled by socialist censors. They'll forget about the broken promise of a 25% reduction in cell phone fees. They'll forget about the hollow promise made to Canadians living with disabilities. They'll forget about losing their businesses, their jobs, their homes. But most importantly, we'll forget about the government's latest interference with a criminal investigation. Obscene. There's no other more accurate way to describe the way in which Trudeau used the Nova Scotia tragedy as a promotional opportunity to market his gun ban. In his first public statement after the rampage, Trudeau stated that he had spoken to both the RCMP commissioner and the Minister of Public Safety. That same day, the Washington Post reported Trudeau had crowed about his new gun laws that were in his back pocket. Months later, the families of the victims of the tragedy demanded a public inquiry. Chief among their questions was, why did it take so long for the public to be warned about an active killer on the loose? At first, the demand was ignored by the government. When an inquiry finally was announced, it was to be behind closed doors, done in secret. The survivors demanded transparency. The government relented somewhat. At first, Trudeau stacked the panel with cronies whose loyalty to the Liberal Party was unquestionable. They got rid of Annie Get Your Gun, a previous gun confiscation minister, at the demand of the victims' families. She's the one and only former minister who had been held in contempt of Parliament for having the justice officials brief reporters on proposed changes to the criminal code before they were even tabled in the House of Commons. The demand for a public inquiry was also granted. Last week, we learned at least one reason why the Liberals wanted to keep any inquiry behind closed doors. The phone call between the superintendent of police overseeing the investigation into the mass killings and the RCMP commissioner came to light. No wonder the Liberals didn't want an inquiry, let alone a public one. The RCMP commissioner had tried to bully the superintendent into jeopardizing the investigation so Trudeau could score a political win over the graves of the victims. Despicable. What the government knows, and the government knows this was despicable. That's why the Liberals tried to cover up the truth. Originally, the Justice Department gave the inquiry 132 pages of the superintendent's notes. The Justice Department never informed the inquiry there were 4 pages that they were holding back. Those 4 pages detail the phone call between the commissioner and the Nova Scotia RCMP. They held those 4 pages back for months. The fact that the Justice Department was willing to withhold politically damaging evidence does not bode well for the Emergencies Act inquiry. If Trudeau is successful in withholding evidence from public inquiries, it will make it easier in the future to declare new emergencies. Live from Ottawa, this is Cheryl Gallant.